K-pop appears poised to continue making waves this month as well amid reports of new releases, virtual initiatives and global nods of acknowledgement. So what's the latest with BTS at the 65th Grammy Awards? What's the significance of the recent Visionary Award for Bang Si-hyuk? And what are the broader implications of the latest nods to K-pop? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Much to the dismay of its fans worldwide, BTS did not win a title at this year's Grammy Awards. For more on this and other news, of course, I have Bernie Cho, the head of DFSB Kollective, here in the studio. Mr. Cho, it's great to have you back.
Good to be back.
I also have K-pop columnist Jeff Benjamin live on the line. Jeff, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Right, Mr. Cho, let's start here in the studio. Could we begin with a few words, perhaps, on BTS's most recent defeat at the Grammys and its implications?
So I'll keep it short and maybe bittersweet. I think if we had to pick two words, because BTS was nominated in two and maybe I would say 2.5 categories. They were up for with Coldplay for My Universe in the Best Pop Duo or Group category. They were also up for Best Music Video for their music video yet to come. And then also, if Album of the Year happened to go to Coldplay, some of the BTS members had some songwriting credit. So whether they got 3 nominations, I'll say 2.5. But I would say this was an incredibly tough year for them to compete in the 2 major categories, one music video and one for the Best Pop Duo and Group. I would say 2 words, iconic and historic. What I mean by iconic was they were up against Taylor Swift and her music video All Too Well. Not only did she sing, not only did she star, she directed the music video. So obviously it was going to be hard to beat an iconic artist, putting together an iconic masterpiece, both audio, visual, across the board. And then historic. Again, as much as it would have been historic for BTS to win at the Grammy Awards this year, I mean, they were up against a wonderful, amazing song from Sam Smith from the UK and his collaboration with Kim Petras from Germany. So not only was it a multinational collaboration, but it was a historic first because it was the first time ever that an openly non-binary and an openly trans artist together had a #1 song that was just stuck at #1. For the latter half of the year, which also happens to be prime time voting period for Recording Academy voters for the Grammy Awards. And so, great song, great effort, great year, but again, I think they lost to an iconic music video and a very historic duo group collaboration.
Right. Jeff, despite that, though, there had been some very early predictions about a possible BTS win for Best Pop Duo Group Performance this time around, especially considering their 2 straight defeats over the past 2 years. What had you expected?
Yeah, looking at this category specifically with BTS and what they've done in the last 3 years, this one is always really, really competitive. You always have a lot of tough competition when it comes to this category in particular. This year you look at what happened. The fact that they were with Coldplay, with BTS, Coldplay, a Grammy darling who has many, Grammy recognitions in their own right, also up for Album of the Year, the top honor of the night. That would make you think, right? There's a lot of, goodwill going, a lot of excitement going for this song. But, there's just so many strong people. You had ABBA, who also are a humongous group who have never actually won a Grammy in that same category. And then, I love what Bernie brought up about the fact that, you had such important representation when it came to Sam Smith and Kim Petras with such a huge song, but also such a huge song in terms of what that represented. So, as tough as it might be to kind of see, a loss here, there's so much amazing representation in this category. And specifically, I've heard from so many people that this was one to watch, especially this year. And, it might hurt a little bit, but it's also, I don't think anyone could be mad at the people who did end up winning.
Right. And speaking as a simple layperson, Mr. Cho, what had been your initial expectations? Because I really thought the third time's the charm. I expected BTS might get an award for group performance, but the group didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say this time and time again, and again, I have to, in advance, apologize to the fans. The fans' input has no impact and no influence on the results at the Grammys. This is very much an industry insider popularity contest, not a fan popularity contest, but an industry insider's popularity contest. And the reality is that, the more and more BTS, and for that matter, other K-pop acts, as they get nominated, look, right now they have awareness. Right now they have acceptance. They just need to go a little bit further and a little bit farther where they start actually collecting awards. So it's very much a work in progress. I know the fans are incredibly frustrated, but this is a peer voted award show. And I think it's a matter of not so much if, but a matter of when. And again, I think for me, I look at hip hop. I mean, they did a 50th anniversary performance at the Grammy Awards this year, and I had to do the math. It took about 26 years for a hip-hop album to win Album of the Year at the Grammy Awards. It took 46 years for a hip-hop song to win Record or Song of the Year at the Grammy Awards. So if we look at the history and the precedence of hip-hop, K-pop is still a baby. It's still an infant. So we got a ways to go, but hopefully they can hit those milestones a little bit, hopefully sooner than hip-hop did. But I think it's just a matter of time.
Right, hopefully we'll keep our fingers crossed. Jeff, with regard to the 65th Grammy Awards, I understand 5 new categories had been introduced this year. Could you tell us a bit about them?
Yeah, it was a really cool year, I think, in particular for these new categories. The big one a lot of people were looking at was Songwriter of the Year, non-classical. How many, amazing songwriters kind of don't get that overall recognition of the work. The Grammys is great about recognizing songwriters maybe in their specific genres or for specific works, but it was very cool to see a non-classical Songwriter of the Year category added. We also had Best Score Soundtrack for Video Games and Other Interactive Media, which is, so cool to see. I love that, very progressive idea of a new category in that way. How many people play video games, and music is such an important part of that. And I love seeing that a woman was the first winner in that category. I think many times we might think it's a male-dominated world, but we actually saw a woman not only get nominated but take the win there. And then you also had Best Spoken Word Poetry Album, poetry, a huge part of anyone's listening experience, and get recognized there. Also some new nods in alternative and Americana music. So it was a very cool, big changes for the Grammy Awards this year, but I think very cool and progressive changes.
Right, definitely big and good changes then. Mr. Cho, back on BTS, following member Jin's enlistment, his teammates have been actively pursuing solo projects. How influential do you believe are BTS members as individual musicians?
Well, I know that when BTS enlisted into the army, not the fan club, but the actual military here in Korea, there was a lot of controversy around the word hiatus. And I think now that, the BTS members have started going into the military, we're realizing that they're really not on hiatus, because as much as people might have assumed and incorrectly assumed that if the band stops performing and producing and releasing, that everything stops. In some ways, what BTS has done is it feels almost like the DC or Marvel universe, where you have them all together as a group, but then they go off and do solo stuff and then come back, which I think is likely going to happen. And so what we've seen is, at least in terms of pure numbers and sales and streams, the BTS solo efforts, I think, are consistently bringing in very healthy individual performances and numbers. And if you do the math and add it up, it almost seems like BTS actually never really took a hiatus. They're still going at it, but just split up and do it individually. But if you add the math, it's like, oh, they're still pulling in strong numbers. And so I think the individual personal efforts and projects is the personal solo efforts, I think, is only going to help build the brand of the band, so that when they do get back together, I think that the collective sort of momentum that the individual projects have brought will only, I think, provide a 1 + 1 = 3 effect when the band does get back together in a few years' time.
Right. Jeff, BTS founder Bang Si-hyuk was granted the first Clive Davis Visionary Award at the Billboard's 2023 Power 100 party. That was earlier last month, of course. Could you tell us a bit about this award?
Yeah, for sure. The Billboard Power 100 list, it's an annual list that recognizes the most influential executives in the music industry. And then this Clive Davis Visionary Award, it's the first time it was ever introduced. Clive Davis is an iconic name in American music industry, but also I would argue the global music industry, you know, responsible for key parts of careers and just icons like Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston, Santana. And, you know, he always kind of had, like the award says, a vision of kind of what could be next, what could really influence people musically. And I think it's very fitting to see Mr. Bang get this award. You know, someone who, you know, I'm coming up on a decade of speaking with him and his team and just knowing their hunger and their inspiration behind wanting to do so much and make big changes and big waves in the music industry with their artists, with their art. And I just love that he also got this at this point in his career. You know, recently he stepped down after Big Hit Entertainment became Hybe. He's no longer the CEO, he's a chairman, and he's focusing a lot more on production and music production. And I love just seeing that he's still recognized for his work and the fact that he can go back to music, focus more on the things that he loves, but still able to be influential in that way. I just love that he's getting that time. And it was really, really cool to see Scooter Braun, of course, the famous music manager of Ariana Grande, Justin Bieber, introduce him by saying how he was someone who did try to connect with U.S. labels 15 years ago, and they all shut him down. They left him wait in the lobby. Now, you know, kind of who's laughing now. It just goes to show that, you know, vision is vision, and I just couldn't be more happier to see Mr. Bang get recognized, especially at this time.
Right. And Mr. Cho, what do these latest nods to Korea's music on the global stage mean for K-pop industry as a whole, and perhaps its efforts or continued efforts to expand its presence on the international arena?
I would say that, you know, whether it's week to week, month to month, year to year, the more accolades, the more awards, the more not only critical, but more importantly, commercial success that K-pop is having, I think in many ways this is just sort of part of the global genreification of K-pop becoming more and more mainstream. You know, again, when I look at certain niche genres that have gone mainstream, I remembered when I was in college, country music was dismissed as something that was remote, but then all of a sudden it was mainstream. Hip hop, the same thing, electronic dance music, and I think right now K-pop is sort of opening the eyes and ears and, more importantly, the minds and hearts of music fans around the world that pop music doesn't necessarily have to be defined and narrowed to English-speaking, English-sung songs. And so I'm very encouraged to see K-pop music with Latin music and now Afro beats all becoming part of this mainstream redefinition, realignment of quote-unquote pop music. And so I think that it's incredibly positive, and I think, you know, one of the things we need to look at K-pop music is it's not necessarily 100% Korean. It's very international. When you look at the songwriters and the producers, you have, you know, creators from North America, from Europe, all over Asia working on it. And if you look at the members of many of the top K-pop boy bands, girl bands, or solo or group efforts, they're very multinational. And so I think that right now, the evolution of K-pop is exciting to watch. But again, it makes some people very uncomfortable, for better or for worse, that K-pop is going more global, because as it goes more global, sort of how much of it is actually still Korean has yet to be seen. But the point of the matter is it's moving.
Right, and I suppose time will tell then. Jeff, K-pop girl group Twice was honored as this year's Breakthrough Artist by Billboard Women in Music. What do you believe was behind this nod of acknowledgement?
Yeah, I loved to see this happen. I was so happy when I heard the news. Billboard's Women in Music is a annual tradition that goes back, I think, you know, at least 15 years now at this point. And for the longest time, it was very focused, you know, maybe on just one music artist and one new artist, and it's mostly been about the industry executives, but the awards have grown in their significance, grown in the artists that they're recognizing. And I think it's going to be really, really cool to see Twice get recognized with a Breakthrough Artist Award. This is going to be a really big year for Twice. We've seen them been able to cross over to the US in larger ways, like their counterparts, first girl group to be able to play a US stadium from Korea. And I'm just really, really excited to see them come out and come to an industry-focused event. I think it's really, really special that Twice is going to make the effort to come out here, engage with the industry that they're so interested in connecting with and accomplish more in. And I'm just really, really excited to kind of see that happen. And I love, again, that this group, 9 members, none of them, are fluent in English, but they're still going to come out and come out to this industry event in the U.S. So I'm really, really excited to not only see the award happen. I think it's very well deserved. It's going to be increasingly more deserved. And I'm also just excited to see what happens at the event itself.
Right, so are we. Jeff, meanwhile, there are pundits who've been saying that the genre of K-pop has perhaps broken barriers of toxic masculinity within the U.S. music industry. What do you suppose do they mean?
Yeah, I think, I think the fact that we're being able to see, these boy bands, like BTS or whoever it might be, represent a different kind of what is considered the ideal male. I think for so long, there was a very obvious, look of what a male pop star looked like. And the fact that so many people nowadays can, see so many fans, so excited and so passionate about seeing, 7 men from Korea, or, Bernie made the great point of the different representation and multinationalism that is seen in so many K-pop groups, recognizing that, these men are just as beloved and just as influential and can be just as, seen as, hot or whatever it might be as, the traditional, male pop stars that we've always seen. So I think it's been very cool to kind of see that breakdown and also just, take down those things of, toxic masculinity in the sense of, K-pop stars are very open about the fact that they wear makeup, they care about their skin, they care about fashion. There are a lot of things, that aren't those traditional, masculine, stereotypes or whatever, but they still have so many, fans loving them. And I think it's just breaking down all these walls. It's inspired me as a guy myself. So I think it's been a very positive influence in that way too.
Right. And Mr. Cho, how are K-pop boy bands matching, that is, the advances of their female counterparts like Blackpink and New Jeans?
Yeah, I mean, matching's kind of tough because, obviously when we read the headlines and we see the buzz and we look at what's trending and Twitter and whatnot, it seems like all of a sudden girl bands have surged to the forefront, whether we're talking about Le Sserafim or New Jeans, Blackpink, Ivy, Stacy, there is just a raft of all these, and Twice, we can't forget Twice, obviously. It seems like the girl bands have surged forward and are at the front of the line. Both the blessing and the curse is because BTS took up so many headlines. We talked about BTS a lot, but when we look at the industry numbers, their label mates, 17, TXT, they've had phenomenal years. When we look at Stray Kids, they not only had one, they had 2 albums hit #1 on the Billboard US Hot 200 album chart. And when we look at the fact that, there's all these boy bands like ATEEZ, even though they didn't hit #1, they're top 5, top 3, selling out arenas. And so I think the reality is that both the boy bands and girl bands are finding a lot of success right now, and it's become more diversified, so there's a lot more talking points. But at the moment right now, and I hope it'll change, but when we talk about the different artists, I think the fact is that some of these new emerging boy bands who have actually rightfully been selling as well as BTS even in certain instances, they're starting to get the attention that for the longest time they might not necessarily have gotten the spotlight, but they're getting it now. And I think, again, for those naysayers and haters out there, they quickly go quiet when they see the numbers, and the numbers don't lie. And so I think that it's great that the women are getting the spotlight and the shine, but the men, they're there very much as well, and now starting to get it. A little late, but nonetheless great.
Right, good to know. Jeff, what has been the response to the debut of K-pop virtual girl group, Maeve?
Yeah, Maeve has been really interesting to watch. I heard a lot about them as they were coming out. And I think, when we look at it, it's good music, good girl group music, great K-pop music. I think the A&R and the production behind it has been great. I think where the disconnect I'm seeing with fans and the kind of confusion about that is they're wondering kind of what makes this so different from an actual K-pop group that could have real life human members and, perform this music on stage. They went on a Korean music program, as all K-pop groups do, but there wasn't anything so technologically insane or advanced. They actually looked a lot like a traditional girl group that we would see on stage today. And so I think a lot of fans are wondering, well, why are they virtual, or why do they have avatars in this way? Why not just have this group perform as real people? So I think that's kind of the puzzle that Maeve needs to continue to spell out for everyone, is kind of show why they are different. And, I think we'll kind of see how that goes. But, from a music standpoint, production standpoint, it's been very cool to watch. And, I enjoy their song. And I think that we just got to show why do they deserve, to be up there with, all those great groups that we've been talking about this entire segment.
Right, and Mr. Cho, what are your thoughts on the prospects of virtual K-pop acts? I mean, as you mentioned, do they hold commercial clout, do you think?
I don't have a yes or no answer on it. I think I would probably lean towards maybe, and the reason being, and I think Jeff alluded to it, is part of the appeal of K-pop and is the fans. And the fact is that these virtual bands, there's this lack of fan interaction. It's cool to the point where it almost feels cold. And so I think the jury's still out in terms of their ability to connect with fans, because there's something that can't replace that interaction. And then the other thing is that, look, I think with these virtual and avatar-like K-pop stars that are emerging, I mean, the K-pop industry is really tapping into two huge trends right now. One is video games, which is hands down the biggest exports out of Korea in terms of pop culture. And then two, all the buzz about Web3 and metaverse. And so in many ways, these virtual K-pop stars / avatars are positioned to tap into these two huge trends. Now, where a lot of people in the industry are a little bit concerned or worried is hand in hand with these virtual avatar K-pop stars is the two ugly letters of the moment, A and I, artificial intelligence. And so the more AI is incorporated into the making of these pop stars, not only in terms of how they look and how they feel, but if the creative process is also being in some way, shape, or form, compromised or replaced, that makes a lot of musicians and producers and songwriters extremely uncomfortable. And so for me, I would say I'm in that uncomfortable camp, because as much as I like to see innovation in the music and in the technology space, there might be a point where it goes just a little too far. And so I am, on this one, I'm not going to throw down any bets. I'm just going to say I will pleasantly sit on the bench and watch from the sidelines.
To see how it unfolds then for the future. All right, Mr. Cho, as always, thank you very much for your insights and your time today. And Jeff, over in New York, thank you so much for being with us live at this very late hour at your end.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, guys.
Right, well, that ends Monday's edition of Issues and Insiders. We return same time tomorrow with a check on stories here that made international headlines over the past week. Join us then.